Hey everyone who's here with us today. Thank you so much for coming and being a part of this talk. We're really happy to have you here. We'd like to invite you to the speaker talk with Karl Mehta, who is a serial entrepreneur and the CEO and founder of EdCast. Today, you're going to have me and Pallavi host this. So Pallavi, do you want to also introduce yourself right now?
Hi, my name is Pallavi. I'm also on HackThis staff. Thank you just for coming out today. We're really excited.
Okay, so let's get started. Karl, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and what is it you do and your background with education and tech?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me, and you guys are hosting an amazing event. So congratulations in putting together this Illinois HackThis. I'm a big fan of hackathons. I've ran many hackathons through my nonprofit Code for India. We'll talk about it later. So in my journey has been mainly being as an engineer, very much like you guys. I did my electrical and electronics computer science almost 25 years back. So it's been a long time. And have been fortunate enough to work in the tech industry for all these years, building products and tech, everything from starting from semiconductor industry back in the days in the early 90s in Silicon Valley. It was the real Silicon Valley. It was semiconductor. So I started my career in the chip industry doing designing of chips. So that was more hardware design, and then moved on to systems, which is combination of hardware and software and things like that. In the telematic space, and went into software and applied into electronic payments, and built a company in micropayments and wallet and virtual currencies and things like, before what Bitcoins is now. We built a virtual currency before Bitcoins. And then spent a year at the White House as the first presidential innovation fellow for President Obama from Chicago. Good roots, good connection to Chicago. And then spent time also as a venture capitalist, as an angel investor, investing and helping and supporting, nurturing entrepreneurs, building a lot of different tech. And then I was really both fascinated and frustrated by the state of education, learning, skilling, that whole spectrum, and felt like I should just give up my very comfortable job as a venture capitalist. Life was too good, and I felt that I need some more chaos in my life to go and build something from the ground up. And so left the Menlo Ventures to start EdCast. And it's been a great ride in past 5+ years. So been building technology from the ground up in the learning, skilling, talent management space, more on the workforce side. Although I am equally passionate about the entire spectrum of education, from early childhood to, K-12 and higher ed and the lifelong learning.
Well, that's really interesting to hear that you started out with something that wasn't really software development at first, and then you got to creating a company for a learning platform. That's really interesting. So tell us a little bit about the world of entrepreneurship, and what did you feel was sort of like the point in your life when you had an idea that you wanted to transform into a business? And so how did you sort of see a problem in the learning industry and sort of just continue with it?
Yeah, good question. Well, so all of us see problems all the time in front of our eyes, and as an engineer, we have we are blessed to kind of at least be able to build or do something about it. If you have good technical skills, if you have good engineering skills, you can think about, as long as obviously the problem statement is engineering. Obviously, if it is healthcare related, then you need another discipline, medical science, things like that. But I think the starting point of entrepreneurship is to be able to identify, the problem, and ensuring that the problem is validated enough to be, you have the real data points to be able to solve that problem, have some kind of a technical feasibility to be able to build a solution around it. So I think the journey to entrepreneurship was mainly driven by having an engineering background and to be able to look at the world from the lens of engineering. And whenever I saw a problem, I always looked at every problem. I mean, like most entrepreneurs do, you look at it as an opportunity, right? Because when you see a problem, rather than, I mean, sure, the first emotion could be frustration because you have to deal with the discomfort of a problem. But as you analyze and you figure out that, hey, if there is a solution to be created to solve the problem, and you can see that millions of people could benefit because if many people are experiencing the exact same problem, then there is a huge opportunity, right? So that's the starting point of any entrepreneurship. Obviously, there's a lot of other ingredients that goes into it besides having a good technical skill set to be able to engineer a solution. And I mean, EdCast was very similar journey. I had my own pain points, pretty heavy pain point. As a venture capitalist, I was meeting very young people like your age who are starting out a company, and they would come and pitch us both to me individually as an angel investor or as a VC at a large firm. And I would have to continuously read and learn in order to even understand, because technology changes so fast that you have to keep up all the time. I mean, in pretty much every space, the knowledge, the rate of change, the knowledge, the learning is changing rapidly, right? Even in medical science or other fields. And I realized that my whole learning, the process of learning and how I learn was very cumbersome, right? Very unwieldy. I had to go to like 50 different places. I had my accounts on Khan Academy and Coursera, Udacity, and Udemy, and you name it. I'll go to MIT, open source, OCW, and all these different places. And it was very difficult to organize my content and very difficult to engage with it because there's so many different sites. And there was zero ability to get some smart recommendations. And so the idea of EdCast was that, hey, this is so difficult in this day and age. It's 25 years after internet, in 2000, and I'm talking about 2015, 2016. It's been 25 years since I was using internet. And we have so much data available on an individual, right? Who you are, what you're trying to learn, what have you already learned. So, the opportunity was that, how can I use all this data that's already available and then marry that with all this content that is available, right? So there's a massive amount of content available, including free, great content like MIT and YouTube and Khan Academy, all of that stuff. There's lots of personal data available in the sense of, as long as I'm willing to part with it. And there is AI and machine learning and all this technology available to be able to create a good fit between the two and create a great personalized learning experience so that I don't have to go to 100 different places, saves me a lot of time, keeps me up to date, and then also motivates me. Or, if I'm not sufficiently motivated, sometimes then it can also trigger and get you into that habit, because it's very important to form the healthy habit of lifelong learning, because there's not always enough time that you can put at a stretch to do one big course. So it was very important to do kind of chunk it down and create kind of that micro learning and do a daily habit. So all the stuff kind of put into a nice package, which is mobile first, AI first, API first. And that was the whole idea behind starting EdCast.
No, that sounds great. That sounds great. And I think what sets you apart from the rest of us is that you have identified a pain point, but then you've also taken the risk to sort of come up with a solution that you may think is viable, which is really great.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. I think kind of you might have touched on it definitely in your previous answer, but what is your process of starting a company? So in other words, how do you go from just an idea to a real and impactful business? Because I think, as college students, we think of so many things every day, whether it's in our classes or problems that we have in our life. So I guess how do we take that and then create something real out of it?
Sure. Yeah, look, it's a very long journey. It's, first of all, I would kind of caution it that, nothing happens overnight. It looks from outside, when a company is built, it looks from outside that it is a overnight success, but it's like a 5-year, 10-year overnight success. Okay. So you have to have a long-term vision and a long-term commitment. So that's the first step. I think people I see get frustrated because they have a good problem to solve. They have a good team to build the solution, but then they have a very short horizon, and that could be one of the biggest reason for failure, because you just don't give enough time, because everything takes time, longer than you expected, by the way. So that's the first lesson. The second step, I mean, is having built your mental mindset that, hey, I'm really committed to it, I'm really passionate about it, I am going to give a longer term to it, not like I'm going to expect results in like days and weeks and all of that. You got to obviously have a very strong validation on both the problem statement and the solution. So it's a lot of time, we think that this is a really big enough problem. We also get very excited about what the solution is. But the reality is that, when you go out and test it out and you talk to other people who are experts or not experts, whatever, I wouldn't put a lot of over indexing on the experts. Like, you got to talk to general people. Sometimes experts are very biased because they've seen so much that they actually tend to discard, right? And that's why many experts actually don't end up becoming an entrepreneur, because they see more risk so it's okay to see sometimes less risk, but it's important to kind of get that validation from the actual potential user of that solution, right? Which is basically what you call a customer validation. So if you're defining a problem, let's say for a K-12, and you're saying, hey, I want to give this to kids in whatever, I want to teach kids algebra, right, or math, and I have a radical different way to teach math. Before you invest a lot of time and money and effort into it, it's super important to get a lots of validation, right? So market data. So that's very critical. Having a stronger team that has a complementary skill set, right, is super critical, because building an organization, building a company, and a real company, it requires a lots of different skills, and seldom one person would have all the skills. And even if you think, generally we all suffer from the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is, our perception of our skills is much higher than our real skills, by the way. So we have to be more honest, intellectually honest, and really list it down that what am I really good at, and then what are all the stuff that I'm not good at, right? It might be a very short list of what I'm good at, and might be a very long list of things that I'm not good at, right? And then identifying people who are good at things that you are not good at. That's a very important skill, right? It's like seeing in your friends and say, oh, my friend is really good at this, but I'm not good at this, and that's great, right? Having that ability, then you can put together the whole team. It's kind of like, a sports team, and you say, okay, this person's really good at offense versus defense and all of that stuff, right? Same thing. If you don't have that well-rounded 360 skill in the team, then it becomes very hard to solve the problem, right? And it's just like a system. You will say, I need a hardware guy, I need a software person, I need an overall system thinker, I need a front-end software guy, back-end software guy, database guy, all that kind of stuff. So the well-rounded team, the validation. I actually had given a TEDx talk on this exact topic. It's on YouTube, so I'll love if you'd like to watch it. It talks about the five steps in an entrepreneur's journey, and it's I've kind of given it in a much more elaborated way. But I would kind of just give it here. I'll just pause it here.
Yeah, I agree, definitely. Running a business cannot be a one-man show, and it has to be a group of skilled people with different kinds of skills, as you mentioned. And so coming to that, where do you see sort of great ideas coming from in the different organizations that you've been a part of? And what kind of people bring in these kind of ideas that motivate you to keep going at it?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think the starting point of a good idea is really comes from uh, having a very good skill set in observation. So if you are good at observing things, just seeing, observing, and feeling, right? Having that feel when the general people will see the same thing and they will not be able to observe what the problem is, right? They will not be able to feel it. But if you could develop that skill, and generally what happens is that, if you really care about something, then you will always have a more better feel, and you will be able to observe things that other people will not, right? It's kind of like, think about like your kids or your siblings or whatever. If a mother or a father goes into like a kinder care with a bunch of different kids, right? The parent will observe something about their child, right, more than the teacher, because there is a lot more connection, right? And every parent will observe that their child more than the other kids, right? So it's kind of natural. Why? Because there is a caring about it. And so you will observe that, oh, this child behaved like this, and he did not eat this cookie or something like that, which other people would totally not see it. And so I think once you define like, hey, what I really care about in this world, right? What are the things that are problematic in this world that I really feel for, right? Some people are very passionate about environment, right? You see them all the time. Some people are very passionate about certain type of activism, right? And they will go and do all kinds of things. So once you define that view, your view of the world, and with that view of the world, you start observing the world, right? You will start seeing problems that other people will not be able to see, right? And that's the starting point of entrepreneurship, because the entrepreneur is the one who will see very clearly a vision in a very foggy thing, where for everybody else it's very foggy, right? And that's where the best ideas come from. And then obviously, once you observe, once you feel the pain, then you can go very deep into that problem. And even before you go into the solution, and this is a very important point, to not jump into solution, but spend significant amount of time on the problem itself. Okay? And think more and more and more and more into the why this problem is happening, right? And if you go dig deeper layers, and there's a great technique for it called 5 whys. So, for every problem that happens, you have to ask why, and then you have to ask again why 5 times, right? And if you ask that 5 times, the fifth time you get to the bottom of the layer, and you get to understand the root cause of why this problem is happening. And now you have a pretty good definition and understanding of it. You've done research on every layer of it. Then, whatever solution, there can be always multiple solution to a problem, right? So it is super important to not stick to or create a very strong viewpoint on the solution. Because what will happen is this, that many companies and many people fail because what they do is, A, they have not done the deep study of the problem. Second, they pick one solution and they become very passionate about it, and they just try to hit with that solution. Now, when that solution, exact product market fit, right, the connection, they fail, and they get very disappointed. They get very frustrated, and they say, "Oh, I invested and spent my years on the solution," right? But they can't develop that, the meta self-awareness, which is saying that, you know what, I should have rapidly iterated, and I should not have been fixated on the solution. I should not be obsessing on the solution. I should be obsessing on the problem, because then what happens is, most likely in almost every venture, in everything, the first solution is not going to work. Okay. You will build it, you will spend your time on it, you will bring it here, and it won't work. It won't solve the problem. So then you bring the second, third, fourth, fifth solution. And sometimes it's the fifth iteration, and sometimes it's the 50th iteration of the solution work, right? It's kind of like, what is this number from Thomas Edison? Like, what was the experiment number, what, some hundreds or thousands before he invented the light bulb, right? There's a famous thing around it, right? How many number of iterations that he did. I can't remember the exact number, but that's what it is, right? In reality, what you end up doing is this, that the iterative way of innovating ultimately gets you to success. But it requires two things. One is, the perseverance to be able to hang in there, right? Because most people will give up by the time the fifth time or the 10th time or the 15th time a solution doesn't work. They will give up, right? Or they are so much obsessed about a particular solution that they don't want to try another one. So those are the two common human psychological things that comes into play.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy, actually. I think like one thing that we kind of touched upon before, and kind of going along with the problem solving vein, is that something you've said is that in a company, like, success is very much based on the team. We talked about how, we want to surround ourselves by people who know the things that maybe we don't. So I guess both, what's your advice to finding a good team to work with? Because even during this hackathon, people are, searching for people to work with. And even in college and in the future, nothing in our line of work is completely individual. It's always collaborative. So yeah, so what's your advice for finding a good team to work with?
Yeah, that's a really difficult problem, but it's a very much solvable. And you guys are in a generation which is far more luckier than my generation. So you're super plugged in with internet and networks and all kinds of stuff virtually, and people all over the country, all over the world. Back in the days, 25 years back, the internet or the social media didn't even exist, right? So there was no a global directory. You have almost like a global directory on Facebook, Instagram, and find boom, 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 who's friends with who and can reach out, right? So I think you have the network. The way to find is, look, this hackathon that you're doing is amazing. That's why I love hackathon, because it's the best place to find people with complementary skill set, because you have a compressed time frame, right? Whether it is, we used to run 24 hours and 48 hours hackathon, but you guys probably, let's say, a week of hackathon. You have a defined problem statement, and you have a group of the 600, 700 developers, and you can just ask for, hey, I'm working on this problem. I need da-da-da-da-da. This is the skills. And somebody will come in and like pitch in and all that stuff. And this whole team formation becomes so rapid. Like in our hackathons, when you used to do, I understand now because of COVID, you guys are doing it virtually. We used to do a hackathon physically. And what we did was we would list out all the problem statements on a wall as people came in the morning. And then we would give them only 1 hour to form a team, right? So it was like speed dating. Like seriously, in the hall, everybody's like going out and talking and say, hey, do you know Java? Hey, do you know big data? Hey, do you know this? Hey, do you know iOS programming? Do you know Android programming, right? Hey, I'm building this app. I need this stuff. I need that stuff. So like everybody's shouting. It almost like the hall kind of looked like a New York Stock Exchange where all these traders are like trading and saying, hey, I want to buy this stock, sell this stock kind of thing. It was a great environment. It's a lot of energy. It's beautiful. They all know that the time is ticking and they got to pick a partner and they got to form a team. And like in 1 hour, like we'll generally do it like 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. And by 9 a.m., people have to be on their tables. And, we would say like, 5 people per team or 8 people per team or something like that. And they would have found somebody. And it was fantastic. In fact, the interesting thing is I love to tell the story that one of my first engineers in EdCast, I found in a hackathon, just like this, So we did a hackathon at Google, I was looking at all these people who are doing what, and I found Neil, and and after the hackathon, I hired him, for EdCast. So these events that you're doing are, if you participate more and more into hackathons, like the one that you're doing, even other, right? You're going to come across people from different parts of the country or different places in the world who has some amazing skill set that you need that to complete the puzzle, right? And and hackathon is a nice way because it's kind of like a forcing function, because the moment, if you don't have something like a real project or a real deadline or a timeline, and if you're just looking for, hey, I'm trying to build something, and then if you start pinging people on LinkedIn here or there, it may take a long time. Okay. But I think this kind of an event, everybody is looking for the complementary person. So it's a very accelerated way to get there. So I would say that, use these types of events to go find people who have that complementary skill set to your skills.
Yeah, no, that's a great point that you mentioned. And I think the hackathon is like a best way to figure out who works best under stress, especially 36-hour ones. So it's definitely a great way to find more developers who are like aligned to your ways of thinking and who can sort of fit that puzzle piece, like you mentioned. So coming back to your company in specific, EdCast right now, what made you sort of enter the education space with this company, and what does the future of education look like to you?
Well, so I'll answer your second question first. So in terms of future, right? When you look at the past, education has been around for probably thousands of years, right? And maybe 3,000, 5,000 years back, back in India, where I come from, there you had a teacher, and you had students, and probably they didn't have a classroom. They would sit under a tree or something, right? But it's kind of like a virtual classroom, right? If you just have to draw the wall in your mind. You fast forward that like 5,000 years now, not much has changed in education. You still have the classroom, you have the teacher, and at least you have the four walls. And instead of a blackboard type thing, something which is hanging on the trunk of the tree, it is on a wall, okay? And that's how most of the classes are going on. And it's really, there is some value to that, but, it's in today's society, that one-to-many and that classroom type environment is not the best way to deliver education for many reasons. Number one is that people are highly distracted today than 5,000 years back, right? Or 4,000 years back. When the students came in, they just sat and they focused on what the teacher is teaching. They also had a very focused streams of things that you want to teach. Here, you're looking at 15 different things. You're highly distracted. So just putting somebody in the classroom and lecturing them doesn't work. Any teacher who is just lecturing is just super boring, right? We all know that. So much of it has not changed, and that's why the next and what we've already seen in the last 5 years of education, things have changed more in the past 5 years than probably 500 years, right? Just in the past 5 years, you have all the MOOCs came in, right? The edXs of the world, and the open content like Khan Academy and the MIT Open Courseware and things like that. That never happened. It just happened in the last 5 to 7 years. Okay? The second thing is obviously the availability, the ubiquity of the devices and mobile and all of that has completely changed. Third, due to social media and the network-based learning, a lot of learning that we are doing today is network-based, right? You're collaborating, so already things have changed rapidly in the past 5 years. So if you just extrapolate that, I think the next 15 years will have a massive change. I think the whole education system will look completely different than what it is today. Right? First of all, we've already seen, with COVID, maybe COVID just accelerated it, but it's almost like a death of the classroom, right? Even in this fall semester, most of the colleges are not even starting, right? It's all already gone virtual and digital, right? So everything is going to become more and more digital. There is an importance of physical, meeting in person, and there are certain skills that we learn by being in a classroom with others, but not the traditional one-to-many classroom. You still need people in a room, but it's going to be more collaborative. It's going to be more many-to-many. Right? It's also going to become more self-driven, okay, and self-directed, as opposed to what's being asked you to do. What is being asked? for you to do, because the more we tap into our strong internal interests and define the way how we want to learn, the effectiveness is much more higher because it is coming naturally from us, right? As opposed to somebody telling us what to do. There's always a big difference in that, those two, pedagogies. So the other area, obviously, we talked about the network. Now, you have technologies like AR and VR that's going to play a huge role, because not just to create this remote learning more interesting, but think about it. The so many concepts in science or otherwise are so difficult sometimes for people to understand unless you can break it down into like beautiful 3D visualization, and like you can actually play with it. It's your ability to absorb the concepts becomes very, very high, kind of like going to a subatomic particles. And if you're actually able to see how the electrons are moving, and if I change the voltage here at point A, and how does it reflect here in point B, you can see this beautifully in a virtual reality, and you can exactly understand how all these things work, right? So this VR AR is going to change rapidly. The other aspect is that the more and more learning is going to happen experiential, not just as a VR AR, but experiential more from doing an actual work and a project. So in the past 500 or 1000 years, it's the learning is more front loaded in your life. So you go through K-12 and then 4 years of undergrad, and you get to whatever 21, 22 age, and then you go out to the workforce, right? Now what is going to change is that this front, instead of front loading, it's going to become lifelong learning. So rather than spending 4 years in college at a stretch, it may feel like a lot of waste of time, because you are staying within the comfort zone of a college campus, and you are disconnected from the real world outside, right? So there is going to be a lot of embedding of real world project and kind of stuff that you guys are doing, which is fantastic, right? Doing hackathon, things like that. But I think we're going to see a lot more connection between industry and academia. It's going to be like, maybe in 10 years, 15 years from now, the bachelor's degree is going to look very different. It's going to be like you do 1 year in college and then 1 year in industry, and then again come back for 1 year in college or something like that, right? I think MIT, friend Dr. Sanjay Sharma, he's put together a vision for the future of education, and I think it's a public document on MIT. If you want to search it on Google, it's worth reading it. And they talk about where MIT thinks that the education will be, 20 years out.
Yeah, I think like I guess along that route too. What made you kind of want to enter the education space with EdCast in particular? And we know that EdCast is the 4th company that you guys started, which is super impressive. So like, I think there were some questions that also appeared in our chat about this, but how did you combat the challenges that you were faced as you built like each of your companies? Like what went through your mind? What's your strategy overall when it comes to problem solving? I think we talked about the 5 whys, but are there any other strategies that you keep in mind?
Sure. Well, so entrepreneurship is a tough thing. It really tests every aspect of your ability to, fight and survive and setbacks and catastrophes and things like that. And there are, in some ways, once you kind of have gone through it, there are a set of things that you would come across as challenges, like, the problem that you thought doesn't seem like a big enough problem, and it's the solution that you thought is already doesn't work, or somebody else is doing it something. The people that you relied on turns out to be not the right people. You can't work with them, whether it's a personality issue, attitude issue, skills issue. All kinds of things happen with the people. Investor issues, because you may think that you have a great plan, but it's hard to convince an investor to for them to see the same thing and to be able to continuously invest. And especially if you can't find a product market fit fast enough to be able to get to that revenue situation that investors generally like to see, then it becomes even more difficult and challenging. So these are all pretty well-known challenges. I think there's a lot that you can learn, obviously, by listening to many podcasts by many great entrepreneurs and this TED Talks and things like that. But most important thing is to be able to build up your your own mindset once you've learned all these different lessons and the lessons learned. And the most important and the good thing about with all these podcasts and videos and all that is available today, you don't have to repeat the mistakes that other people, like even myself, I've done hundreds and hundreds of mistakes, right? And you don't have to repeat the same mistake. You might probably do some mistakes. Mistakes are inevitable, but do new mistakes as opposed to repeat the same mistake that other people have done, right? So your most important thing is to learn from as many failures out there. I think important to look for where things failed and kind of analyze and research why those things failed, rather than just looking at success story. Sometimes the success stories can be very deceptive, okay? Because you may feel like, oh, look at this, this person was so lucky and he just did this, and this, and look at how successful it became. Those are all wrong narratives, and it looks, it's really, it can be discouraging, or it can actually put you into the wrong path. Because you may think that at a surface level, if you can just do this X, Y, and Z, success will be possible. So it's important to learn from as many failures as you can. In fact, if you know people who have failed or some ventures have failed, it's important to reach out to those people and ask them, what were the failures, what were the lessons learned, and things like that. So that's very, very important. I think in EdCast case, we've gone through a lot of roller coaster that every company goes through. We thought that this lifelong learning platform that we were building will be a great consumer product, almost like a Facebook or an Instagram. And when we launched the product, it was a failure. And all of our almost 18 months of work, when we built a really cool app with almost all the features of Facebook or Instagram, you can follow people and you get your feed and all kinds of social stuff. And I mean, there were downloads, there were installs, but there was no engagement, not like real adoption, right? And we couldn't figure out that why aren't people coming back? I mean, we have a nice app, we are bringing you nice content, we're bringing you knowledge, we're bringing you learning, and we just couldn't figure out. And later on, we found out that, look, there's no fundamental trigger that a person has unless they are hit into a problem like saying, hey, I'm not able to find a job, or I am not able to, or I'm not going to keep my job, right? I'm in my job, but I might not be able to keep my job. So those are the two things that are, that were the trigger points that we identified. And so then we had to pivot, and we said, you know what? Instead of a B2C business, we will have to take it B2B, because people in a company or an organization, at least, they have some trigger point, which is saying that, oh, maybe my role is going to go away, or maybe I'm not happy in my current role, or I want a career progression and I want to get my next promotion, and I'm going to get there only if I have the skills for the next role. So there was a well-defined trigger point. It's the same person, by the way, right? A person that we try to reach via directly and doesn't have a trigger point, it's the same person. You put it in the context of a company, and now that individual has a different lens of looking at EdCast and saying, oh, this is very valuable, right? So these are kind of like the failures that you go through, and then you quickly iterate, and you'll somehow, you'll land into, if you are there long enough and you try hard enough, you'll land into the right place.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And one thing that I find really interesting is that with the COVID-19 times right now, we've realized the potential of like online education and just how important it is. And you sort of, with EdCast, you saw this boom in online education coming a long time ago. So speaking off of that, as an engineer, what areas of education would you sort of advise fellow developers to focus on, given this time?
Yeah, well, so I mean, it's an open canvas. It's a what we call like a blue ocean. It's like there's a book in business called Blue Ocean, Red Ocean. It's like kind of there's an open space, open canvas. Pretty much every aspect, whether it is a early childhood, K-12, higher ed, and workforce. And there are tremendous opportunities because the speed at which everything is changing and everybody needs to learn. I mean, think about it, and not just look from a developed country standpoint, right? There is a huge challenge actually in the developing nation. If you look at the pyramid and like look at the bottom of the pyramid, right? There is like at least a 400 million kids who are not who should be in school who are not in school, right? That's a huge problem to solve, right? I mean, sitting here in the United States, you know, we tend to look at all the first world problem, but there are some pretty darn big problem in education, in Africa, in Southeast Asia, in South America, in East Europe, in many places in developing world. So that's one big area to really focus on, which I'm quite passionate about solving that problem. And it's a big piece of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Education is the SDG number 4. And if we want to see these countries develop from, and come out of poverty, the only ticket to prosperity or even economic growth from poverty is education, right? There's no other way. So we have to solve the big problem of education, especially in this developing world. And how do we make education super accessible, super affordable, super effective, right? Super remote, because they are living in distant villages, and the best teachers not gonna go there, right? I did this experiment 5 years back, even before starting EdCast. I took this Raspberry Pi, which is a kind of like a mini computer, and we took the Khan Academy content and we loaded that on a Raspberry Pi on whatever, I think it was probably 512 MB memory space. Wasn't big enough, but I think we got like some 100 Khan Academy lectures on it, right? Roughly 1 MB each, so probably 200 or 250. And then we took this Raspberry Pi, little computer like this much, right? And we took it to some very impoverished places in India, like remote villages where there's no school, there's no internet, right? I mean, there is school, but there's no internet. It's like a municipality school or something like that. And all we had to do then was get a display. Those are easy, right? Just a display or a TV. Some people had TV. And we just plugged in the Raspberry Pi to the television. And now these kids are learning algebra or math or whatever it is, or science, from a lecture, right, which is beautifully narrated by Sal Khan. They wouldn't have even like a teacher 1/10 or 1/5 of the capability of Sal Khan, right? So these are some very interesting stuff that you can do. That you have challenges of no internet, no power. So we were actually running this Raspberry Pi on a battery pack, okay, as well as a display on a battery pack, right? So no power, no internet, and yet you can do international, global type education to a local village. But anyway, that's an example of problems to be solved at a very large scale. There's problems to be solved even here in the United States, right? I mean, the early childhood is a huge problem here. Those are the best developmental time of a child. The neurons are getting wired at that time. There's some really great study that if you want to learn 4 or 5 languages, the best time to learn is from like 0 to 2. In the first 2 years, if you put the child in an environment with 4 languages, literally they'll pick up everything from Chinese or Russian or whatever language you want. So there is so much focus needs to go into that 0 to 2 years. There's absolutely no focus. There's nothing available, right? Even in the United States, which is your best time to learn, right? Then even the K-12 is completely in a mess. We know that in the public school, the kids aren't even reading at the same grade level and things like that, other than private schools. And you take out some of the high-ranking zip codes, everything else is in a bad shape. Colleges, I mean, America is blessed with good higher ed in terms of good universities, but you also have community colleges that really are great infrastructure, but they don't have the great teachers and they don't have the great tools. Sometimes, I mean, there are good teachers. I don't want to offend anybody, but I mean, it can be much better quality, rigorous education that can be provided using the fantastic physical infrastructure that exists in the community colleges. And then the workforce where I'm working in, I mean, there is so much need in the workforce to continuously upskill and reskill. People's skills are obsoleted. They go to the job, and it's a really bad situation if somebody loses a job. They have a family to support, and how do we proactively get people to become lifelong learner and think ahead and upskill themselves before they lose their job? So across the board, there are absolutely fantastic opportunities. There's so many technologies are hitting it at the same time, whether it's AI or ML or AR or VR or collaboration technologies and video and audio and all kind of stuff is coming together. So there's tons of opportunities.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much for your response. I think that'll definitely help a lot of our attendees who might still be figuring out kind of which problem they want to tackle within education for our hackathon. But yeah, to pivot a little bit, we definitely talked about one of the challenges as an entrepreneur is kind of that selling yourself, selling your idea. So what is your advice for pitching to people who want to invest in you and your company? I know many attendees here are or will be going through like recruitment season within the next couple of months. So what's your best advice for selling yourself?
Well, the first step is to know who you are pitching, okay? And you have to do tremendous amount of research into that. So if you're pitching for a job at a company, do a lot of research and understanding that company, read as much on their website and outside, understand their product, understand their market, understand their culture, understand their people, the type of people. You can go into LinkedIn and find out what kind of people and their background they are working there, right? All that research is super important because when you're pitching, it's all about the audience. Whether you're pitching for a job, to a organization, or to an investor for an idea, right? If you're pitching an investor, you have to understand, that investor as much you can find publicly or even through your network, that, what kind of companies that he or she likes to invest. Is it, are they very biased towards heavy technology, or do they like about ideas that are game changing at a business model level, but doesn't have to have very heavy on technology? Because, not everything, a great idea it's not just always a technology heavy lift, but it can be sometimes just same commodity technology, but a complete radical shift in business model. So there's so many different innovation axes, right? And investors have different bent. Like, if you come to me, I being an engineer, I have a technology bent. So I'm always looking for what's the technology. But if you go to some another investor who's not an engineer, they're not heavily focused on that aspect of it. They're more focused on the financial model, the business model part of it, right? So the most important lesson is to do tremendous amount of research to the level that when you talk to that person, you should be able to amaze that person how much you have done the research. Okay, that's the test. I've had those moments a very few times in my life where somebody came and pitched to me something, whether it was for a job or whether it was for investing, and they had read every single one of my articles that I had posted on LinkedIn. They had watched every one of my videos that are on YouTube. They had read the book that I have written, everything the person had done. It was mind blowing. And I was like, and the way he started speaking, I was blown away that how much time he has invested in me and knowing all this stuff, right? So then it almost feels like you feel like obligated that, oh my God, I need to give tremendous attention to this person because this person seems to have spent literally tens and hundreds of hours, right? So do that, because that's going to be super valuable. And then what happens is, obviously, your pitch is your pitch, which is your strengths, okay? But, if we just talk about our strength to somebody without the context of what that person is, that strength has no value, right? So aligning it, packaging it, presenting it, those skills are very, very important, as much as, your idea and your hard skills. In today's world, the soft skills are very, very important, right? So don't go by just purely hard skills that, okay, I'm an engineer and I know how to build stuff, or I understand the technology. Even when you post pitching, when you're really building a company, if you don't have good soft skills, right, it's really hard for people to work with you, right? So building that good communication skills, that good presentation skills, having that research mindset to be contextualizing it to the other person who is the receiver of your communication, those are very, very important.
Amazing. I think that will help a lot of our attendees, especially in the next couple months, but in the future. And we wanted to finish off just kind of this our fireside chat question and answer with just one more question about your advice to give to attendees. We are running a little late to everyone watching this stream, but we are happy to stick around past 3. Karl, if you are okay with that too, then we can move on to attendee questions and answers. But yeah, one last question from us, which is, what is one piece of advice that you would give to college students, either discovering their passions or setting out for their first job, on how to achieve their goals and get the most out of life?
Yeah, so my son graduated 18 months back from USC, so I would give the same advice to you guys that I give to my kids, which is that identify one area that you are. I mean, passion is an overused word. I like to use the word passion, but there is some downside to that, and the downside is that you may have multiple passion, or sometimes at your age, in the college days, your passion may change, right? You may be passionate about something, and 6 months later, that's not your passion anymore, right? So I don't like to use the word passion as much. What I like to what I told my kids, and my daughter is in 10th grade, and I'm like, I keep encouraging them that find one area that you really have like the feel for it, right? And it's hard to explain the word feel, right? It's like kind of like you have to feel it in your guts that this is something that either I truly enjoy, right? Or I mean, you have like the most extreme emotions, right? Either I truly enjoy, okay, or I truly feel frustrated about it, okay? But frustrated not from a negative standpoint, we're just saying like, I hate this and I don't want to see this or do this. You feel frustrated about solving it, all right? Or you enjoyed so much and you say, you know what, like I want to do something here because I naturally feel like doing it, right? So what I call is like tuning your mind to your natural frequency. It's kind of like how you tune your guitar, right? Before you start playing guitar, you have to tune all the 6 strings, right, to its exact frequency. It's the same thing, that just like before playing guitar and before starting your career, it's important to tune your mind to your natural frequency, because I think all of us have some kind of a innate talent, right? There are skills that you develop during your 4 years of college or your school and all that. But there is something innate about yourself that if you go deep enough, right, you're gonna connect with that and you say, you know what, like this is one area that I am really crazy about it. I really want to do something about it, right? Once you identify that area, then there is no need to jump into an entrepreneurship or anything like that. What you need to do is that in that sector, go and find the best people, go and find the best companies, right? And go and work for those companies, right? Like think about if you are, let's say if you're really big about environment, you get really frustrated about climate change, things like that, right? So that's that other extreme, right? Then what you could do is go find companies that are really doing something about it, go work for them. You learn a lot over 5 years, 10 years. And then once you put in 10 years, generally in any field, it takes roughly about 10 years to become an expert, right? I don't know if you guys have read the book about the 10,000 hours, right? A book, right? How do you get expert in something? Roughly 10 years, okay? So spend 10 years in it, and then you will be able to, and of course, if you are lucky enough and you're smart enough, you will figure out even in a year, but otherwise it'll take you 10 years to get there. Or you pick something that you really, really enjoy, and you know that you can take that field to the next level of advancement, and then focus on that. You have some audience questions, or?
Yeah, we have some. Well, that was a great answer, and that definitely gave all of us a lot of clarity on, product development and how we can all be entrepreneurs. So some audience questions that we have for you today is successful founders often risk everything and go all in. Do you think that not having a backup plan or an option except for succeeding contributes to their overall success in a company?
Yeah, that it does increase the probability of success, because if you go all in, then you are putting a very high intensity. Okay, your level of intenseness is very high, right? And the fact that you don't have any plan B, that I can go and collect something easily doing some other job, your mind is going to be racing to do the next thing. You're not going to easily give up, because you don't have the plan B. If you give up, where do you go? There's nowhere to go, right? So yeah, it definitely, not having a plan B can increase the probability just psychologically, because it improves the commitment, right? When people have plan B, they're half committed, right? Yeah, I'll try out, let's see what happens. If it doesn't work, fine, right? That kind of a half attitude doesn't work in entrepreneurship, right? You have to give yourself 100%. It's kind of like professional sports. You cannot become an NBA star, okay, or you cannot become any major league sports player if you say, I'm gonna do try it out. Just try it out doesn't work. Like, you commit to it, and you spend, like, if you want to become a gold medalist in swimming in Olympics, you got to be spending like 12 hours in the swimming pool every single day, sunshine or rain, and you have to practice, right?
Yeah, I think kind of along that vein too, with going all in, our next question is also about that theme. If going all in is important, how can people like college graduates overcome the comfort and security of a tracked career and convince themselves to go all in?
Well, in fact, when you are starting out of the college, is actually the best time to take some risk, because you don't have a mortgage, you don't have a family to feed. Unless you're in different circumstances where you have to bring money to pay for your family. It's maybe your parents. Everybody's in a different economic status situation, but to the extent that you don't have a lot of financial obligations, that is the best time. And your expenses are very low when you are starting out at your age. You don't have much expense. 23 years back, when I was doing my company, or about even 20 years back, I was eating lunch every single day in Taco Bell. Okay. And my only lunch was a 7-layer burrito, which was like $1.50, or probably at that time $1.10 or something like that, right? So you see, your expense is so low that you can survive with a no salary or low salary. And as long as you don't care about a lifestyle, right? You have to be very clear that, I want to focus on this thing, and I just need a bare minimum fuel to survive, to eat. I'm not recommending you just survive on Taco Bell. Eat some healthy food and don't mess up your health. But I'm just giving you a metaphor, right? That when your expenses are low, you have the ability to take risk. Your risk-taking ability starts going down in life as you get further along. And then if you've got good salary, and then you get yourself a good apartment, and then you have a mortgage, or you have a big ranch, at that point of time, your risk-taking ability is almost zero, because you need a minimum income. Unless somebody doesn't give you that, even in a startup, you can't join. So I think the two best time to do it, and I'm not, by the way, recommending either that you you take a lot of risk early on. I would actually also recommend that go work at a good company, okay, right out of college, gain some really good experience as well. There is no rush to entrepreneurship. You don't have to jump yourself and push yourself too hard at the very early stage of your life. It's important to get some good grounding, some good learning, some process, procedure, some other experts in a big company, small company, work at a startup as well, so that you see the whole 360-degree view of it. And maybe then once you gain some 8 years, 10 years of experience, you have also saved enough and you have some savings left. At that time, still it's even a better time to take risk, because your risk is going to be worth it, because you have now 8 to 10 years of experience, you know exactly, and you're not going to do a lot of stupid mistakes.
So another question that we have for you today is, what surprises you the most about your job, and what is surprising to you as an entrepreneur?
Wow, surprises. I mean, there's daily surprises. Okay? When you are running a fast-growing and technology business with lots of innovation, there's always surprises, like every day, because the daily surprises are either you thought something will work and it didn't work, right? You thought something will not work and it works. That happens too, by the way. Okay, because you're making so many multiple bets. You're building product, you are servicing customers, you are trying to win deals, and some deals that you're trying to win, you lose them. That's a big surprise. Some deals that you think that you might lose, you end up winning them too. So there's a lots of variability, and not everything that you can control. And I mean, in some ways, the biggest lesson or the biggest surprise that I see every day is that how much little we actually control. I mean, you put in a lot of effort on lots of different things towards a particular outcome, but you might end up getting to that outcome in a kind of like a roundabout way. So you think that you will go from like point A to point B, and the surprising thing is that generally the path is never a straight line from point A to point B. It's like A to C to C to D to F to G to then to B. So, and that whole path is very surprising how it unfolds, right?
Next we have, oh, this one's kind of interesting. It's, what are some entrepreneurs and ventures that you look up to personally?
Yeah, I am obviously a big fan of Elon Musk. I really admire him. I think the world has not seen anybody like him for hundreds of years, right? So it's somebody whom I really look up to in terms of innovation, in terms of his breadth and depth of engineering knowledge. I mean, being an engineer, I really, more than entrepreneurship as much, I admire his engineering skills and his ability to go to that level of detail and to challenge and to push the envelope, whether it is in energy or space. The other, Jeff Bezos is great to watch from, although it's a commodity business like retail, but what you see there is the importance of execution, that you could take a commodity business but turn into a super power just by the sheer flawless execution, right? And putting in those processes, procedures to kind of run at scale, at unbelievable scale and speed, which is just mind blowing. Obviously, the Google founders have done, from that one basic idea to what they built, is just it's just unbelievable, and super respectful to how much different innovation that they've brought on the internet space. So, I mean, there are lots and lots of this, and not just in, I mean, these are all the tech entrepreneurs that I look up to. I mean, there are folks that you learn from even in a non-tech, like people like Phil Knight, who is the founder of Nike, right? And I've learned a lot by just reading his book about how he thinks, or people like Jimmy Iovine, who came from a music industry, Interscope Records, and he built a tech, like the Beats headset, right? and sold to Apple. And here's an example of a non-tech person like Jimmy Iovine going into a tech business, and making it big, and fighting the fight with Sony and Bose, who are like really big players in those headset business, right? And you go like, wow, how did that happen, right? And then you kind of like peel the onion and you try to read, and you sort of find like amazing things that they did to make that happen. So there's lots and lots of fascinating stories of people doing some crazy innovative stuff.
So another question we have for you today is, does interviewing people help isolate why a problem is occurring? And how do you know when you've reached the core of the problem?
Well, interviewing people absolutely helps who have experienced the problem, so that you can validate that from both the quality and the quantity and the statistically and the different variation of the problem, right? Some person may have faced it, same problem, but differently, right? There are multiple use cases of the same problem. So interviewing people helps. In some cases, there is a potential, so you have to look out for that. There is sometimes data can lie as well, as much as we depend on data, because the data can be skewed, right? So not overly depend sometimes on the data as well. You have to understand kind of like the underlying reasons that might be skewing the data as well, right? So yeah, it definitely helps. I mean, the root, you have to keep asking whether it's the 5 whys or whether it is a 15 why, but you have to know, you will know that you've reached kind of like the bottom of the ocean, like the ground. When you touch the ground, like you go deep, scuba diving or whatever you do, deep dive into an ocean, and you know that now you hit the ground, you will feel that, right? Because that's where you'll find the gems and the pearls. And when you start seeing those gems and pearls, you know that, hey, I've hit the ground reality of the root cause. Till that, you keep asking the question, why?
Another question we had was, how do you overcome or address the fear that your venture may not give you financial security?
Well, it's a great question, by the way. That fear is always there, right? It's the fundamental. It's kind of like, and whether it's in a venture or anything, like if you set out to be a sports person, you may have a fear that, hey, I will never win, a gold medal, or I will never get into a major league team, right? So the fear of failure is always there. I think your fear starts reducing in the proportionately to the deeper level of knowledge that you accumulate in your space. Okay. The more knowledge you have, and the more, and not just knowledge by the mean, I don't mean by theoretical knowledge, right? Do like practical stuff. The more you do that, the more you start feeling confident in your fear. It's kind of like, think about public speaking on the stage, right? Everybody has a stage fear, right? You have to go in front of 400 people in an auditorium on a stage, and you may feel like, everybody, by the way, the best speaker feels like, hey, I'm going to forget what am I going to talk about, and I might go blank out and things like that, right? So, but that fear starts coming down and down and down after you've done practice, right? By the time you go 20th time on the stage, you kind of, you have the fear, but you also have the confidence, saying that, you know what, yeah, sure, so what if I forget my lines or what I have to say, I will just jump to something, and then by the time it'll come out, the next thing that I want to say, right? So I think the most important thing to cut down that fear is to go intense on the knowledge acquisition, go intense on practicing it, right? And then your fear will start coming down.
So our last question for today is going to be, what skills do you think are absent from most failed ventures?
What? Sorry, come back again. What?
What skills do you think are absent from most failed ventures?
Most failed ventures. Okay. What skills? Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a number of things that can go wrong. But the bigger things to think about is, number one is that the problem that you're trying to solve is not a big enough problem. Okay. So, even if you develop your venture, but that is not enough big enough size of the market, then you can't scale it. Second, the solution that you built is nothing, it's not highly differentiating, right? There are 15 other players who is offering the exact same solution. So it's becomes very commodity. It's hard to differentiate, hard to stand out. And ultimately, if the other solutions are winning and you don't have any big differentiation, there's no way to win, right? So that's second. Third, just the ability to execute, assuming that those first two things are taken care of, and like you have a checkbox on both. You have a big enough market, you have a great differentiating solution, but you're just not able to execute. And execution has so many reasons why it fails, right? Whether it is people, whether it is process, whether it is personality, whether it is culture. There's so many aspects of it in execution, right? Fourth, it could be capital, right? You may have all those three things, but the long period that it requires to get to profitability, that requires a long time funding. And if you can find investors who are aligned to your thinking and has the long-term staying power to keep throwing money at it until the company becomes successful and profitable, then you can be a failure, right? So these are like the four big bucket reasons. There can be like many dozens underneath each bucket, but you got to watch out for these four big things. If you take care of these four big things, you are in a pretty good place.
Cool. I think that wraps up all of our audience questions. I just wanted to say really quickly for our audience, we're going to be sending a link in the chat as well as a password. You can fill out the event attendance form for a chance to win a prize. But thank you everyone for coming out. Thank you so much, Karl, for coming out. We appreciate everything that you said so much. Yeah, Neha, if you have any other thoughts.
No, that sounds just about everything. Thank you, Karl, for taking your time to be here today. And I think that everything you said was so valuable for all of us. And we're really lucky to have a person like you, especially with your experience in the education and tech industry, because it goes so well with our hackathon and just about what we're trying to convey here for our developers. So thank you so much for coming. And this was a great opportunity just to hear you speak.
Great. Well, nice meeting you all. And thank you for inviting. And good luck to everyone for the hackathon.
Thank you so much.
All right. Take care.
Yeah.
See you. Bye-bye.